I'm very sorry.
My fault.
In terms of my emotions, uh, the difficulty is in the fact that I actually got not only a chance, but I got basically like the ball is practically in the net. I mean, there's no defender there. It's it's an open goal, and that's where the disappointment comes in. I don't care if you win the tournament, just win 4 games, and this is a good practice because you need to win 4 games in the candidates, and so that was the threshold, 4 games, and Gukesh won 5.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the C Squared podcast. We are back after a prolonged wait because Fabiano, you were playing the candidates. We were both in anticipation of the candidates as well as during the candidates in Toronto. We did some training. We had a huge event, and we're going to cover all of that in today's episode. But first of all, I'm just happy and excited to be back to the channel. I hope you guys didn't miss us too much. Fabi, tell us a bit about, let's start right there. I mean, sum it up for us, sum up your current state after the candidates.
Yeah, well, of course, it's good to be back, and it has been a long break, obviously, because not only of the candidates and playing the tournament, but also because the preparation beforehand was quite consuming.
Yes.
And yeah, we had some training beforehand, actually quite a bit, and also some tournaments beforehand. So it was definitely a very busy period from, let's say, February until the end of the candidates. So it was a very, very busy period. And probably comes to no surprise to anyone that my mood, at least the last few days, has been of immense disappointment,
Yeah.
and it was kind of a heartbreaking finish for me, and for us as well. You were also there as my trainer,
Yeah,
as
I
one of
think
my trainers.
for the whole team, it was obviously heartbreaking. It was a difficult tournament altogether, but these are the type of tournaments that we're, playing for. And for you as a professional at the top level, these are the type of opportunities that you're always going to hopefully have. And some of them you're going to convert, some of them not. And the ones that you will not are obviously going to be heartbreaking. But yeah, keep going.
Well, yeah, it's of course the way it happened is the heartbreaking part because there's like a million scenarios in which I don't really get chances going into the last round, where I'm not even in contention going into the last round. I'm sure we'll get into the details more in a bit. And there's also a million scenarios where I don't get chances in the last game against Jan. Although my mood after I beat Prague was one of like in the situation I probably will get chances. I don't know how many chances against Nepo, but it would be strange because the situation is where he has to win and I have to win, and we don't really care so much about a draw. So it would be weird if it's just like a typical Grandmaster draw where no chances occur for either side.
Mm-hmm.
Now that could also mean that I lose the game or I get losing chances against Jan. But since I have the white pieces, I would be in a great situation, which is of course well, kind of we're getting in the weeds a bit, and we'll discuss the details.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of my emotions, uh, the difficulty is in the fact that I actually got not only a chance, but I got basically like the ball is practically in the net. I mean, there's no defender there. It's it's an open goal, it's and that's where the disappointment comes in because if I had gotten no chances or if I had drawn the previous game against Prague and Gukesh beats Alireza as he did and some bad luck there, Gukesh wins against Alireza, you could call it bad luck or you could call it whatever you want. But then there's, what can you say? It's kind of you tried and you didn't get chances. But I did also get some luck against Prague. So my emotions at that time were like, oh, this is amazing. Things are going my way all of a sudden. I beat Prague, I beat Vidit. These things are not at all um, not only
Trivial.
unlikely, but you could
Yes.
say that it's not that they're a given, but they're even like an unlikely thing to happen. And I also beat Ali Reza, and a lot of things went my way. Like beating Vidit in itself of course, he was maybe not in the best state. He was disappointment. He had his own tragedy happen against Jan in the previous round. I got some guys at good moments.
Right.
And and then I started to really believe in my chances. And also I think my play was maybe not like perfect, but I was definitely doing the right things in terms of putting pressure and searching for chances. So once things start to go your way and you build that confidence, and then you get this like golden opportunity, this is of course the moment when you don't want to waste it. And that's where the way it happened was heartbreaking. And the fact that I even got chances later in the game against Jan, I'm sure we'll go into the details of that game in a bit, but I had like multiple chances. Of course, once I had like the basically like the easy wins and those I'd missed, then of course it's tough. Then, it's like, well, you can say it's a 50-50, right? Okay, I had like the easy wins like Rook D2, everyone pointed out, and Bishop C2 instead of Bishop H7, and to some extent as well, King A2 or King A1, kind of easy decision, which I rushed and missed.
Hmm.
But then even at the very last moment. But of course, then when you're getting down to seconds and you have to see some tactics and it's a 6.5 hour game and so on and so forth, then of course you can kind of explain away the mistakes or you can understand them. But overall, yeah, it was a tragic game. In some ways for him, but I don't think that was the game that Jan can look back to as like the disappointment because uh, he objectively didn't really get chances in that game, right? I mean, he had chances in a theoretical sense, but he had to win with black on demand. Okay, pretty tall order, and um and maybe for Jan, like he can look back on some previous games, but
It's
for
crazy
Jan, it
because
was
at that
basically
point, going into the last round, the only time he was in a must-win situation in his whole career at the candidates, I think 3 appearances, but also it was the only round in which he was trailing at the candidates, which was absolutely insane. Um, to understand the consistency that he's had over 3 candidates is absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah, difficult situation for him. Very difficult situation, especially since he had the black pieces and also given, let's say, a bit his repertoire, right? He's very much a Petrov player against e4, very much of a Nimzo, very tight, maybe sometimes Tarash with black against d4. So, given all of those details, it was a very difficult situation for him. Very peculiar situation for everybody. I don't think it ever happened in the candidates to have 3 players in a must-win situation, all 3 of them in
well,
contention, trailing the leader.
okay. I'll sort of push back on this a little bit. Also, I think that Emil said this. He said it's the first time in chess history that 4 players going into the last round have a chance, a theoretical chance of winning
Mm,
the tournament,
mm,
which is actually untrue.
right.
And for like Emil, who's a very big chess history guy, he knows a lot of chess history. I understand this is like what he missed was a recent chess curiosity, which was the 2018 candidates, where I obviously had a chance because I won,
Mm-hmm.
and Mamdiarov had a chance, and Karyakin had a chance. They were trailing me by half a point. But also, Ding had a chance. He was trailing me by a point. And people kind of forget that Ding had a chance there. He had to have everything go his way. Basically, he had to beat Karyakin. I had to lose, so he bridges the 1 point gap. Now he's ahead of Karyakin, who goes to -2, who goes to +1. Suddenly, Ding is +2, I'm +2. And then, very importantly, he also needed Mamedyarov to beat Kramnik, which would put Mamedyarov at +2 as well. And the tiebreaker there was not a playoff system,
Mm,
but it was first of all most wins. So if Mamedyarov doesn't, um, so first of all it's head to head and then most wins. So if Mamedyarov doesn't beat Kramnik, then I drew both my games against Ding, and so that's a wash. But then I had more wins than Ding because I also had 1 loss, and he would have had 2 wins and 12 draws, and I would have had 2 losses, 4 wins, and 10 and 8 draws.
mm-hmm.
And but then the weird thing is that if Mamedyarov suddenly wins, then we have head to head back. So I have 2 draws against Ding, I have 2 draws against Shakhriyar, but Ding has beaten Shakhriyar, which means that in this kind of mini circuit, mini tournament, he actually has the best result, and he would be the candidate's winner,
Mm.
which would have mattered a lot in 2018. but eventually Ding actually became world champion via his own unusual way. So this is just a funny curiosity to look back on. But it does mean that the situation going into the last round was not unique. Four players having a theoretical chance has happened 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's just an
I
interesting little,
I
not
think it
really
was
real.
just peculiar because all of the players that had a chance were playing against each other,
Hmm.
which put, for example, especially in you and Jan's position, you're playing against each other and you were both in a must-win situation. So it's a very peculiar situation, especially I would say for the player playing with the black pieces. But yeah, difficult difficult to say. Let's say who was in a trickier situation. I guess Hikaru knew exactly what he needs to do. He knew
No,
exactly what
definitely,
Gukesh is
definitely Jan.
probably going to go for. You think so?
Definitely Jan.
Yes.
100%. Jan was in the worst situation because Gukesh basically he's probably going to play. He's going to try to make a draw, and
Right.
then if a playoff happens, he'll take his chances there.
Mm-hmm.
Hikaru needs to win. It's pretty clear. He has white pieces. His opponent needs to draw. It's a standard must win versus must draw
It's
game.
interesting because Hikaru at the dinner he did say that he sort of expected Gukesh and even during the game to maybe play for more, maybe try to win just for the simple fact that a tie breaks doesn't guarantee anything, especially a tie breaks against you or a tie breaks against Jan. Hikaru viewed Gukesh as the underdog against pretty much anybody during tie breaks.
No, I mean that is definitely a possibility. Like we can only speculate, of course, at this point. You would probably say by the numbers, probably Jan or I would have some sort of edge on Gukesh. I mean, you can put it at whatever numbers you want.
Yeah.
Everyone will debate it. Some will say maybe 60-40, some will say 50-50, some will say 65-35. You can debate this all day long. Um, it would be a two-game rapid match, which in my view puts it kind of at 50-50.
Yeah.
And playing for a win with the black pieces against Hikaru, who is very solid and very strong in a classical game. Um, like let's say if Gukesh had gotten good winning chances, then of course he would have tried to take them. But you don't set out right from the start to do this because this is simply a way to lose and to make Hikaru the winner of the tournament, which is also not what Gukesh is looking for.
Yeah.
But you could have seen somewhere during that game because at some point Gukesh was just slightly better. He was a pawn up, not a whole lot for Black, of course,
That's what
but you could
Hikaru
tell
was
that he
saying.
was trying to press this a bit. Yeah, it,
And,
it was
and
clear.
Hikaru was trying to push him into, okay, you get a better position, but the overall position remains complex. And Gukesh was saying, no, 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 we're going towards the end game. I'm going to maybe relinquish my advantage, but keep the position simple.
Yeah, this was a practical choice. It makes sense. Like he could have traded queens at some point, which he did, or he could have remained with queens on the board, which was
Mm-hmm.
the objectively perhaps better choice. But definitely understandable to trade queens and then you never lose. While if you keep queens on, okay, things can eventually go out of control, especially in a no increment time trouble situation. As happened, for example, with Gukesh and Alireza, right? He was pressing, but then it goes into time trouble and some kind of random stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
And you never know. Like you can never keep full control. If you trade queens, okay, you keep full control, and then Gukesh just watches my game with anticipation and sees if maybe he plays a tiebreak, which if he plays a tiebreak, it's not a disaster for him. It's not what he wants, of course, in that situation. He would prefer to to win cleanly, and anyone would. But but a tiebreak is still a normal situation. It would be the best chance that a player would have before the tournament. Like if you told any player before the tournament, okay, you get a tiebreak. Like you can just take it now. Everyone would say yes, without exception.
Yeah.
Uh, because like let's say the best chance that someone was given before the tournament was like 30%, right? I don't know. I think that's what some people gave me before the tournament. In a tiebreak, you get 50-50,
Yeah.
or maybe a little bit less than 50-50, but close enough. Like, let's say tiebreak with me and Jan. What are you going to put that at? It's just a pure 50-50, right?
50-50. Yeah. Especially on a
Yeah,
two game match. I mean, 4 game match, you can start arguing one way or the other,
sure.
but 2 game match is such a random amount of games, right? Such a minimal amount of games that
Yeah.
you cannot really put.
It, the only thing you'd say is like, okay, if Nijat plays Hikaru, for example, it's
Okay.
like a 90-10 or 90.
Yes.
But even that's better than Nijat's original chances. Because I think Nijat's original chances were like maybe one. Well, okay, I
Right.
don't want to. I mean, he's a great player and all, and I'm not trying to denigrate him, but his chances were like one in
Less than one.
5,000 or something.
Less than one. Yes, yes, less than
Yeah.
1%. I mean, these are by mathematical models that were posted by
Sure.
various
Yeah.
uh, publications before the event. But yeah, let's take it back a couple of notches and talk about the preparation before the candidates. So let's start after the American Cup. I think this is basically where we left it. We didn't do a recap of the American Cup, if I'm not mistaken. In
No, we
retrospect, did we? We didn't,
no,
right?
we did not.
We didn't. In retrospect, did you feel like that tournament helped you be in shape? Did it play against your energy levels? Let's say, how did you feel that tournament impact on the candidates?
I would say neutral. It didn't like disturb my energy. First of
Mm-hmm.
all, it was quite a break in between those two tournaments. It wasn't like it wasn't a 14 round event, right? It was kind of a few classical games, a few rapid games, and so on. It was quite an intense schedule because we did play like classical and rapid tie break in the same day. So that's pretty intense,
Mm-hmm.
but definitely not the kind of intensity that like lasts and takes your energy, let's say a week after. This is the sort of thing like you're tired at the end of the day. Um, and maybe you're a bit emotionally drained because
Yes.
of okay, a lot in all these rapid matches, there's a lot of like ups and downs and so on. And it was overall a fun event. Of course, congratulations to Levon for winning that tournament. He was the deserved winner, basically, after he beat me in the Blitz tiebreak, in the Blitz playoff. Then it all seemed pretty smooth for him after that. Like I think that was the moment when he started to really feel very confident about his chances to win the tournament. And yeah, a good tournament for him. And then we started training. So we did like a few days of training, and then we went to Toronto.
Yeah, that was directly in St. Louis, directly after the American Cup. Spent a week there. Then myself and Grigory, we traveled, as well as Misha Antipov, who was on the team as well. We traveled to Dallas to play the collegiate Final Four, and then immediately after that, that was just a weekend. Flew to Toronto, and we met there on April 1st. That was a few days before the beginning of the candidates. We had some time. I think it will definitely help being on basically the East Coast, same time zone. So, how did you feel about that? Do you prefer? I mean, you've played so many in Europe. Now, this one was the first one, let's say on home soil. How would you feel about that?
Well, I think it's fine, but like if it were in Madrid or somewhere in Western Europe or somewhere in Eastern Europe or somewhere in Asia, I would probably go a few days before and acclimate anyway. So the time the time zone was it was like convenient, but it doesn't really make a huge difference. So that part, well, I have to say like every candidate is also different. You know, you prep and you feel like okay, you're doing the best prep that you can, or you're trying to. And then once the tournament starts, you realize like all this prep, of course, it's helpful. Like you need to do it. You kind of want to do it to feel like you've worked towards it. But then everything is different once you start playing. It's like the first round I play Hikaru, and he plays an opening that I haven't looked at in, I don't know, a year and a half, maybe. And uh and did prep play a role in that game? Like prep, you have to do it, and some games prep plays a role, and some games it doesn't. And overall, the preparation I think was pretty decent.
Mm-hmm.
It's, there's always going to be mistakes. There's always going to be things you look back on, you're like, I should have done this differently. I should have done that. And sure, you can't know everything is easy with hindsight, right? Like I lost to Hikaru, I should have played a different opening. But okay, you play a different opening, maybe you also lose. And maybe you play that opening, but you play a bit better and you win. So it doesn't come down to openings, but you still need to prepare the openings. But it basically never comes down to openings. Uh, like I think this is the difference between theory and practice because once you're like before the event, you're thinking about all the things that your opponents can do, and you always think my opponent will do the best possible thing. Because what else can you think,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you can't predict the mistakes they'll make. You can try, but you probably can't predict it because mistakes come from a place. that you don't know where it will come from, right? It's like your opponents know they're strong players, they're capable of making the best moves, they know what the best moves are most of the time, and then something weird gets in their head and they make a mistake, or
Right.
weird gets in my head, I make a mistake, and you can't predict what that will be. So you prepare for the best things that your opponents will do, and then suddenly you get to the board and you realize that, of course, they will not possibly play the best moves. They will not play the best openings, and neither will you. And you'll just have a game. And
What do
it'll be
you
very often
mean by
fun.
not the best openings? And this is something I think Magnus recently he discussed the candidates as well, and he said that don't quote me on that, but basically something along the lines of you cannot play the main lines anymore, you cannot play the best openings out there anymore because everybody knows them, and now you basically need to just scoop around the sidelines and try to find something in the sidelines and make them work. Um, let's talk about that and the type of preparation that we had to do also before the event to try to accommodate that reality. And then let's start with the first game against Hikaru where he surprised you with a complete sideline as well.
Okay, so first, what do we mean by the best openings? So
I
when
don't
you
know,
think
the
the best
Berlin,
openings,
the
yeah, yeah. So
the
no, I just want to
Tarnish,
get
yeah.
into it a bit like in terms of a theoretical sense. Like we understand the Berlin is the best opening, the Petrov is the best opening, and so on. But like when you say the best opening, you probably mean the one which allows you to equalize in the most comfortable way
The
with
Najdorf,
black.
for example. I would call that
Yeah, but
one of
this
the
is a
best
question.
openings
Is
as
the
well.
Najdorf the best opening? Because the Najdorf is a great opening, which will certainly equalize analytically,
Objectively, yes.
and very often will also give you a fighting position. But depending on who you are, maybe it's not a good opening for you. Maybe it doesn't, maybe it gives you a fighting position,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but you don't really want to fight.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're playing a stronger opponent and you don't want to play against someone in open battle. So the Najdorf is something where you give white a huge amount of choice. And all of White's choices you have like very adequate answers to. And the nice thing about the Najdorf is that you have a lot of flexibility. Like, well, let's say White plays the most critical line, like Bishop E3. You have like, I don't know, three, four, maybe even more systems which are perfectly adequate against it.
Mm-hmm.
And against any other line, like the Bishop E2 lines, you basically at some point can make any like legal move and it works out fine. Um, but let's say you play the Najdorf and you're playing someone who's much better than you, 200 points stronger. You're 2,400, they're 2,600, let's
Mm-hmm.
just say.
Mm-hmm.
Now you play the Nighthawk and they play the Bishop E2 line, and you cannot analyze this to a draw. So you're going to get a game, and maybe at some point you'll be slightly better with black, but the position will not simplify. You will not ever get a dry position, and so you're going to get an open fight where, yeah, at some point you might be better, and then you'll misplay it a bit, you'll be worse, and then time trouble and so on, and eventually you lose because your opponent's significantly stronger than you. So if you want to draw a stronger player, maybe the best way to play is the Petrov.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is for example, like if we start discussing players directly in the tournament, Nijat. So in his first black game, he chose to play Sicilian against me,
Yes.
a line in the Rosalino. Now the line is perfectly good. It's a line which, for example, Magnus popularized. He played it against me in 2020 in a match, um, in a rapid match, online rapid match called the Clutch Chess event. That was kind of the first time that he was playing, and then he continued after a bit, and it got popular. I played it myself and many other strong players, and it equalizes, absolutely no doubt. But White can get a kind of long fight, which is what I did against Nijat. And so you could say, yeah, he played a good opening. But against me, it wasn't a good opening because in like a long battle, I was the more successful player than him, right? So
Yeah.
then he switched in later games to the Petrov. He played the Petrov against Vidit. He played the Petrov against Hikaru, which transposed to an exchange French, for example. He played the Petrov against Gukesh,
Mm-hmm.
and even though he lost that game, he did at some point equalize the position. So that's a better choice. You want to try to squeeze the game into a direction where you control kind of what will happen. Like White's options are limited, so you control more or less what your opponent can do. You can kind of predict where your opponent may go.
And this is a
And
strategy you would say for a newcomer like Nijat, for let's say an underdog like Nijat, try to cement your opening repertoire so that your opponents are forced basically to to try for more, try for a win, and perhaps break their necks while they do that.
Well, okay. So first of all, this is my advice in general. I'm talking about like Grandmaster, like Nijat, very strong Grandmaster. He's still playing players stronger than him in the candidates, but still very, very strong Grandmaster. Now,
Yes.
if you're like, just beginning at chess, then just learn an opening and learn it well, and it'll work out for you. It actually doesn't really matter which opening. Um, just something you're familiar with.
Yeah.
Now, if we're talking about like the meta strategy of very strong players, then each player has their own. Like you see, Jan, he has his Petrov. He's very
Mm-hmm.
comfortable in it.
Mm-hmm.
He plays it consistently. He sometimes runs into prep, but he is sort of um, kind of trying to enclose himself in an area where it's very difficult for the opponent to find new things. So with Black, he's trying to create some sort of wall, right?
Yes.
Do this in the Berlin, you can do this in the Petrov. You can also maybe do this in other openings, but those are probably the two where you um well, the Petrov has the added advantage that you avoid the Italian, for example. So in the Berlin, of course, it's like very direct. Like on third move, you're trying to get your Berlin and you're trying to close off White's options, but you do have the Italian to account for, so White has some flexibility. The Petrov basically it starts on move two. The only way to avoid the Petrov is there's two ways. Well, either you don't play e4, so you bend in the first move entirely, or you play the bishop's opening, uh, which or maybe the four knights, but the four knights is sort of dead these days. So bishop's opening, okay, kind of half dead, but maybe you can still try. Um, and so this is like this is what like Rustam told me in 2017. He's like, okay, we're going to kill chess and we're going to do it on move two. We're going to play the Petrov and the Queen's Gambit accepted. So I started playing those two openings. Petrov, Queen's Gambit accepted. Uh, I didn't. It's not my style to do this, but for a period I did do this, and you could say with some opening success. Like it was difficult to get an advantage against me.
Yeah. Actually,
And
I saw this um, quite a few times posted on forums. People asking, why did you drop the Petrov? Why did you stop playing the Petrov, given that it's given you so much success?
okay, so this is very simple to answer. First of all, because I get bored very easily, and I don't really want to play the same stuff. Like it's a comfortable life. And yeah, I could have played the Petrov from 2018 until now, and I think that people would just stop playing E4 against me entirely at some point. I don't know. But I like to experiment. First of all, I it helps it helps you kind of learn about chess as a whole. And I don't think that chess is a game where you try, at least like my philosophy is not that you try to like win with white, draw with black. So I don't want to kill the game. That's the thing. I want to play the game. And that's why I like openings, which, for example, I played in, like, allowed the Roast Limo, right, in the candidates. I mean, the Roast Limo is just a fight. You get maybe slightly worse, or maybe you get slightly better, or maybe you get an equal position, but all the pieces stay on the board.
Yeah.
And so, like, my opening choice was a provocation. I was basically saying, please play the Roast Limo against me, and then we fight. And maybe I'll fight in a slightly worse position, like I did against Vidit, and I almost lost. Or we'll fight in a perhaps um, an equal position, like I got against Pragg, and I won that game. And okay, this is the strategy. Um, so part of it is boredom, part of it is that I want to fight, and yeah, actually that's about it.
Is it because of the nature of the candidates where you have to score a lot of points as well? Obviously, if you compare your strategy, our team's strategy to Jan's, for example, it's a completely different strategy. Um, First of all, how did you see what did you think the winning score would be before the event started, and sum up our team's strategy, let's say in terms of opening choices? You kind of already did, um, but if you want to add any other details on top of that, feel free to do so.
Well, okay, so I think that the winning score, you could probably predict that it will be +3 or +4, and probably +3 feels a bit underwhelming because, with all due respect again, Nijat was a target.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you like, you could assume that there are going to be some players who might score 2-0 against Nijat.
Yes.
So let's just see. The players that did this are, well, Gukesh and Pragg. They both scored 2-0. They're the only players who did so.
Yeah.
But you can also assume that like the winning score probably will have won at least one game against Nijat. So Gukesh won two, Hikaru won one, I won one, and Jan actually didn't win any, which
Hmm.
maybe made some actually sort of the difference maker in some sense, you could say.
Definitely, definitely.
If
That
he had won one
his
more game, he
chances.
plays a tiebreaker against Gukesh. If he wins two games, then he wins the tournament outright.
Yeah, yeah. No,
And
absolutely huge.
so, but assuming that if someone scores plus two, it's not like out of the question that they score plus one against the rest of the field, and certainly possible that they could score plus two. So then we're already talking about plus four, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you consider that near the end of the tournament, a lot of players start to loosen up, which we saw. Alireza already loosened up around like I don't know which round, but quite early on. Pragg loosened up at the end, and Vidit was up and down throughout. So it's not surprising that like let's say someone scored five wins, which is what happened actually.
Yeah.
Both Hikaru and Gukesh scored five wins. And if Hikaru had just not lost against Vidit, he lost two games, he would have been plus five.
Yeah.
So actually, Hikaru, like to his credit, he did a great job of winning games. He created a lot of chances for himself. To his detriment, he did lose two quite poor games against Vidit. These were not good games. They were surprising for a player of his caliber, but everything else he did great. It was just like somehow he had this weakness against one player, which was probably just an accident, right? It's just he
Hikaru
had
was
a
a huge
bad day.
dilemma, right, for us, and I would assume for pretty much everybody during the candidates for every team, because I wouldn't say his openings were necessarily super impressive. I think his strategy was with both white and black to just get a game, um, and I guess with black was to just kill the game, but kill it in a very weird fashion in which you cannot really get surprised. Like you do the surprising first, accept, let's say, an objectively worse position, but you know what you're doing, and probably that's going to allow you to equalize. That felt like his strategy, and at the same time, in terms of objective play, he had such ups and downs. The games against Vidit, um, pretty bad. I mean, especially the one where he lost with the white pieces. That was horrendous. Yeah, he lost out of the opening. At move 10, he was lost with the white pieces. Um, but then he also, I guess the game against you was really good. But outside of that, like, I don't know, he was quite a dilemma. Let's just put it that way.
Well, okay, so let's say, actually, I thought that we would go players like one by one, but we're starting with one of the players who has scored best. So we're starting with Hikaru. Okay, um, we can do it this way. Hikaru, generally speaking, he's a player who has a lot of qualities, and he has a generally very high level. His ceiling is high, and his floor, he usually doesn't hit the floor.
Mm,
His floor can be low, but he doesn't usually hit that. Which is kind of expected from the like experienced players. Like none of the experienced guys did terribly, right? You could say, right? None of us had a bad event.
right.
Maybe we weren't. Well, we didn't win, obviously. The youngest player did, which was quite interesting. But Hikaru is a player with a lot of experience, a lot of class, and also has a very good practical sense. So he's a very good practical player. He knows how to put pressure on the clock. He knows how to search for chances. He knows how to defend. And yeah, he does have these moments of weakness, but everyone does. His moments were kind of surprising, I have to say, in this tournament. Like you mentioned, like losing out the opening with White doesn't really happen to him. But it's what I would not have expected. Like I would think maybe that he would struggle to find chances because his like openings maybe don't have the bite
Mm-hmm.
that is necessary to sometimes beat a player like I don't know Jan or Pragnanta or Gukesh or but he did get those chances. He just had these weak moments, which I didn't really expect. Now, in terms of his opening strategy, I like the thing is, if you're a good player, then a lot of things work out, right? Even openings which I would consider rather dubious. Like his first round against me, it worked out. He made a draw.
Mm-hmm.
But I would not recommend this to anyone. I don't see the upside, first of all. You accept a worse position where you don't really ever get better. So it's not like you're worse, but okay, maybe at some point I'll get a fight and there's some practicality there. It's like I'm uh I'm slightly worse and maybe I'll make a draw. But you can also do that in other openings with like less downside. And the other thing is that white actually has a lot of ways to play a slightly better position, so you can't really control fully. Like you could try to analyze this to death, but what's the point? You analyze this for a week, suddenly you feel confident after so much work
Mhm.
put into this like objectively crappy opening,
Yeah.
and then you just make a draw, and then you have to abandon it because you're never going to play this stuff again.
So
Like I don't see
during the
the point
game,
to
were
that.
you obviously you were surprised, but were you pleasantly surprised that he played this, that he chose this?
Yeah, of course. Like he plays this, I'm pretty pretty happy. I mean, I don't remember anything, I don't know anything, but I know that I'm going to get a slightly better position, and that's more than you can say for most of the other openings that we considered from him, like the Berlin, or or uh, or if he was going to surprise me with like something very good like the Petrov. That's kind of annoying, you know? That's like you don't want to see that. Maybe you don't want to see the Najdorf,
I guess
but
I'm trying to remember which ones were the openings that we expected. Sicilian, but one of the main Sicilians was what we expected from him. We were expecting Najdorf. Um,
okay. So the thing is like Hikaru, um, he's been a Berlin player for a long time. So you always consider like he can play the Berlin, and you basically can't refute it. So okay, it's a good opening. What are you going to do?
yeah.
Try to get some small idea and try your best. And if we go back in history, of course, he was a Najdorf player, but we're going back like 10 years or more.
Hmm.
And more recently, he branched out into various little Sicilians, like some Rose Limos. He actually played something against Gukesh in this tournament with G6, some kind of sidelines of Sicilian, which are not that bad. What he did against me is it's not as good as the Rose Limo. The Rose Limo, it's a bit like you're giving your opponent a bit more than maybe in the Berlin,
Hmm.
a bit more of an edge, or a bit more chance to play for a win. On the other hand, if they play for a win, you get a very tough fight, and that's the point of the Night the same. It's like okay, you give your opponent a huge amount of options, but if they want to play for a win, they probably have to take some responsible choices in the opening. They have to play some sharp positions. Now, the one that he played against me, it's like, okay, you give me a slightly better position, and what do you get? You don't get chances to win. You don't really get much in return. And then he abandoned this opening, which objectively he actually almost lost the game.
Hmm.
So he was much worse at some point, basically objectively losing. And then he made a draw, and then he abandoned it. I don't see the points of this, but okay, for one game, it sort of worked out, kind of.
Yeah.
And and then if we're continuing with his like games in the first 4 rounds. I was thinking like Hikaru is not here to win this tournament. He loses from the opening against Vidit. He plays the exchange Slav against Nijat. Against Pragg, he like gets absolutely nothing with white and just makes draw in like I don't know, an hour.
Yep.
It was like a nothing game.
Yep.
And then things like from rounds 5 until nearly the end of the tournament, he was the best player in the tournament, I have to say. I mean, he got this basically like huge chance against Alireza. Like, okay, the game's complicated. They're both playing well. Then it's a draw, logical result, and then Alireza makes a huge blunder. And this was the convergence between Alireza's tournament and Hikaru. Before
Hmm.
this, they were both on the same score.
Hmm.
After this, Alireza was like super tilted, and Hikaru was inspired. And um, and then soon after that, he like beat me. He had some very good prep against Jan. It was like a good pressure game, which didn't work out. And suddenly he's like very much back in the fight, right?
Yep.
With some good fighting chess and so on. So it's hard to judge Hikaru's tournament. I mean, he did some things well, he did some things poorly. Overall, of course, he was in the fight, so it was his best candidate's performance.
Yep.
We just have to say it was like he was in the fight up to the very last round, and +3 is a good result, and um, kind of the level we expect from Hikaru these days. So a good overall level, a good tournament from him, and
Consistent.
good game, for example, against Alireza, right? And against Pragg, very good game against Pragg.
Yeah. Yeah. Good highlights. Let's talk about Abasov. If you wanna take it player by player,
Sure.
Abasov. What's let's say what were the we know what the expectations were going into the tournament. Let's try to analyze his event. I believe he finished on -6 or -7.
7.
-7, given his last round loss against Pragnananda. in the King's Indian. How would you assess his performance, his mental state? I mean, obviously he came into the event. We just found out when we were at the opening ceremony that he had some health issues as well leading to the competition. I don't know how much those affected his play and his preparation, but they should probably be discussed. Some serious health issues that probably required some sort of a surgical component to the whole thing, and probably took away days, if not weeks, from his preparation leading up to the tournament. How would you assess his performance?
Yeah, so well, Nijad is the one player, I think, probably the only player before the tournament who people did not believe had any realistic chance, and I think with good reason to win the tournament. I mean, just by rating and the fact that he's never played a tournament of this caliber, and he's certainly never won a tournament of this caliber, and he's 100 points less than the next closest person, uh, and 170 points less than the highest rated, and there's a lot of reasons uh, why he was not considered a real contender in the tournament, despite being an excellent player. And this sort of was borne out in the games. But he did play an important role in terms of, as we already mentioned, who he lost to and who he didn't.
Yeah.
So the fact that he didn't lose at all to Jan was actually very relevant for the tournament. And Gukesh beat Nijat twice, which I'm not trying to take anything away from Gukesh. I mean, it's not easy to beat Nijat twice. Of course, if you win 2 games, then you deserve your 2 points. But Nijat definitely did play a role, and he was fighting hard. I think the thing is, like, he's a good player, and for stretches of every game, he was competing with his opponents. Like there were times like he's playing Gukesh, and long stretches he's playing at the same level as his opponent or Pragg. Long stretches, and then at some moment things kind of go a bit off the rails, and he loses the game. Or against Hikaru, he went from being much worse to outplaying Hikaru to the point that he was objectively
Closely to
basically winning.
Yeah, yeah.
And then and he's also up on time. And then things go off the rails. It's just like these singular moments, things go off the rails for him, or sometimes things go bad from the start. But he did not play a complete game where he outplayed his opponent,
What
and
would
he did
you
not play a complete
attribute
game.
that to? Is it nerves? Is it just the consistency of maintaining the high level of precision all throughout the game? What's the item that creates this separation between the 2650s of the world and the 2750s of the world?
Well, okay, it's many things. It's like, how can you, first of all, you can't say player by player, like everyone's individual, but it's just skills across the board that make a difference between a 2650, like let's say he is, or 2630 as he is,
Mm-hmm.
and a 2760 or 2780, like I don't know, Jan, Hikaru, uh, Pragnanta, Gukesh, and so on. There's just a variety of different skills. You can just see the level of quality between Gukesh and Nijat. It's night and day in terms of the quality of their moves, not just there's other things like practical skills and time management and so on, which Nijat, yeah, he's actually a fast player, which is unusual um for let's say a 2630 to be up on time compared to higher rated opponents. Usually you see the opposite. He's a fast and confident player, but sometimes being fast and confident is actually because you're afraid of time trouble, as he
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
in some games, and then he missed a chance against Hikaru because he rushed a critical moment. He went from much better to much worse in one move.
Yeah.
And so that's also time management. It's not just being fast. It's knowing when to be fast and when to be slow. Hikaru is very good at that. Jan is quite good at that, but um, sometimes Jan does tend to sometimes rush things. He's the fastest player. Like if you look at the time management, Jan is the only person always ahead on the clock,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
almost never in time trouble.
Yeah.
But he can sometimes rush a bit. Like Levon was in the same way. Super confident, but sometimes rushing even in winning positions. So okay, about Abasov, he is the underdog. He fought. It didn't work out. Obviously, he's probably quite disappointed with the overall showing, but he did fight, and yeah, that's all there is really to say about his tournament.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's move on to another, let's say, wild horse, and that was Vidit, who was back and forth. At times, it felt like he was in contention. At times, it felt like everything is slipping away from him. Started off in incredible fashion with tame draw in round 1 against Gukesh, but after that, a victory with the black pieces against Hikaru, losing in round 3 against Pragg, and that was basically the trajectory of his whole tournament, back and forth, up and down. Very wild player. How would you assess his level of preparation? And how would you assess his overall performance? And let's talk about the time management of this particular player as well, because I feel time management is a factor that we should discuss for each individual player.
Yeah, so yeah, Vidit is an interesting case in this tournament for sure. But so first of all, he came with one of the largest teams. He came with two coaches. He was also there with his sister. So he came with
Surya
a team of
and Vocaturo, Surya Ganguly and Vocaturo. I would assume both of
yeah,
these players were his long time, let's say, coaches. We know that he
yeah,
was
yeah.
training with
Actually,
Vocaturo for a while.
they're both excellent players and theoreticians. So Surya, I kind of know,
Mm-hmm.
and he's quite experienced in terms of being a coach. He worked with Vichy, for example. And Daniele Vocaturo is an Italian grandmaster. We played on the same team many times. I played him many times in the Italian Championship. He's not only an excellent player, but also quite excellent in terms of theory. And he has a very classical approach. Like he's a standard sort of E4 put pressure in the main lines player. And this is why I wasn't surprised that Vidit was sort of this was his like playing E4 and um trying to play in a principled manner. This is actually both Surya and Daniele Vocaturo's approach to opening, so that's not a surprise. You can kind of see like the influence of coaches a bit, especially with him. So I was not at all surprised to see him playing E4.
Yeah.
Now I remember seeing the team after the second game when he beat Hikaru, like absolute overjoyed, which is very understandable. The best possible start you could get. Like first you draw with black against Gukesh, then you win with black against Hikaru. You could not ask for more.
Mm-mm.
Well, I mean, technically you could, but
Yes.
but I guess that's about the
You
best you can
get too
realistically
greedy.
ask for.
Yes, absolutely.
And then third round he's playing Pragg, and Pragg plays an opening which is absolutely absurd. I mean, it is borderline just losing on the spot in the opening, like on move 4, and it's known. But somehow Pragg wins this game. I mean, it wasn't a good opening choice from Pragg, but okay, it worked out. It's one of those things where I'll be critical, even though the result did work out. And Pragg is an excellent player, so of course, sometimes the results will work out even if he's playing doing things which are objectively too risky. And F5 on move 4
Mm-hmm.
is objectively too risky. So for Vidit, I think this start, like the first 3 rounds, was exactly like the rest of his tournament. It's just he wins a good game, he loses a bad game. And he's definitely fighting very well for his chances and getting chances. And then some unfortunate mistakes in critical moments are costing him sometimes half points, sometimes full points.
Yeah, let's talk
So
about your
like
encounter with him. First encounter with Black Pieces, played the Rosolimo,
yeah,
got a
well
worse position.
so yeah, so my game against him was basically that he just outplayed me for almost the entire game. Like just there's nothing else to say. He got a slight advantage from the opening. Maybe the line I played was a bit too risky, and I didn't approach it so accurately. And then I got a slightly worse position, and then he outplayed me. And then I missed this move Queen G3.
Yeah.
And after that, I'm dead lost. And okay, maybe I found like a good practical chance with Queen A7 because I was already like, what do I do here? Do I just resign or or what? So at least I found like a good practical chance. And then I think he had about 12 minutes to find the win. Now, like it's what I told him after the game. Like you play King C2 or C1. I forget which move I said, King C2, C1.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just bring your king to the king side. This is what we were discussing after the game. That's what I was worried about. And then he plays his queen a5. It's like, okay, you either win the game on the spot or you don't. Because queen e5, like if I play rook a1, I resign. So what does black do? So I was like, what am I missing here? I played queen a4. And what he told me he missed was that queen b8 can be met with bishop d8,
Mm-hmm.
which is some sort of blindness, but a very strange moment of blindness. Um, and
Of course, King D7 loses on the spot after Bishop C3, I guess. Bishop C3, King
any
E6.
bishop move is mate in 3.
Queen e5, yeah.
And bishop f6, mate in 3, right?
That's a very strange thing to miss, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that this is basically like the lack of increment made him get worried about time trouble. And there were still 14 moves to go, so he was like, okay, just play fast, don't get it down to second. Like play something fast, you'll win.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if someone had told him at that moment, like this is the last difficult moment you'll probably have in this game. If you play the right move, you'll probably win regardless of how low you get on time. If you play the wrong move, it will be an immediate draw, and that's it. And yeah, that's the story of this game. He let me off the hook, and there's like several moments like this you can point to, like against Jan, such a critical game. It was actually like uh, he played a very important role in the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
At 3 rounds in a row, or like maybe it was not 3 rounds in a row. But there was this game against Gukesh he lost. Very good game by Gukesh, very poor game by Vidit. I think it was probably like Vidit's poorest game.
Mm-hmm.
And Gukesh played like an just excellent game. I mean, basically no mistakes, just outplayed and beat very cleanly. So this is one critical game. And then he beat Hikaru, another very critical game because Hikaru was starting to like creep ahead in the rankings. He had just beaten me, and then suddenly Vidit beats him.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent game from Vidit, very poor game from Hikaru. So it's kind of reversed. And then he played this game against Jan, which after this game I was like so upset. I think you remember.
Yes, of
Uh,
course.
because I was thinking like, okay, I'm starting to like fight back in my tournament, but Jan winning like is almost like dooming me.
Right.
So I wasn't even thinking like Gukesh is the biggest problem at the moment. I was thinking Jan, he wins this game, he's on +3. Like what can I possibly do to fight back now?
Well,
And
I
as it turns out,
want to say that at that point, after this particular game, you were trailing both Jan Gukesh. I'm trying to remember whether you were trailing Hikaru as well, or it was just
uh wait, what were the last? Let me try to remember. So in the last round, I'm tied with
because
Jan and Hikaru.
I
In the
think you were
previous,
trailing Hikaru as well. Hikaru by half a point, Jan by 1 full point at that point.
I was definitely trailing Jan by a full point. Was I trailing Gukesh by a full point? I don't think so. I think half a point.
I want to say you were trailing Gukesh by a full point as well, but I might.
So this was round 9. So it was like Vidit beat Hikaru, which means that I was tied with Hikaru. I drew Nijat, right? Oh, no, no, sorry. No, that was when Vidit beat Hikaru. Then I beat Alireza, and then I drew Gukesh. So I was on +1 at that moment. Hikaru went to +2. He was
Plus
half a
two.
point ahead. Jan went to +3, and Gukesh, I think, was also +2. I don't think he was +3
Mm-hmm.
because he was +2, and then he beat Nijat, and then he beat Fruja, and he went to +4. So I was trailing Gukesh by half a point and Jan by 1. So Jan was still the biggest like issue in the tournament, right?
Yeah.
He was the one who was leading,
Yeah.
clear leading.
Yeah.
And that game against Vidit was one of the biggest like roller coasters. I mean, so first of all, from the opening, I was thinking Vidit is just going to get crushed. I mean, I saw his position after like G6. I think this was around the time I ended my game, and like all of White's pawns are weak. Uh, Vidit is down to 27 minutes with 20 moves to go. Jan has like a full hour. I was like, then he sacks a pawn. I was not understanding what White's idea is. Obviously, Vidit did have an idea, but um, and it was actually not a bad idea, but it looked super, super risky for White.
So you
And
felt
then
at this
suddenly I go
point
back to
that
my hotel room.
Jan is creating a lot of separation.
Yeah, well, okay, like Jan wins the game, he's +3. I was like, this is not going well. Then suddenly I go back to my hotel room, Vidit's winning, plus
Yeah.
4.
Yeah.
He has to play knight takes d5, a move which basically neither player considered
Yeah.
because it sacks a piece, but then the pawns and the king are just too strong. It's a bit surprising, so it's understandable, but it is a clean win. Like it's just GG.
This
It's
was
over immediately.
move 37. Vidit still had 6 minutes on the clock. And yes, if you calculate correctly, you play the move knight to d5, knight takes d5, take c4, take on c4, rook takes a3, rook takes a3, bishop takes a3, and now I think an important move was f3, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
think king b5 also wins,
King
but f3 is like the
b5
cleanest.
also wins. Yeah.
I
Quite
think like F3 is the cleanest because then you don't like allow the possibility that you lose your F2 pawn. Um, and I was like +8
yes,
according to like a strong engine.
yes.
I think so, but then King B5 was also winning, I think, and then E4 you play C4, which I understand because then you there's like
It's a
A4 and
race.
then it's a race and you win. It's not a clean win. So there was no easy win for him in this game, but he was winning objectively. And then okay, he plays King C2, then we have like an objectively drawn position, some kind of like fortress for both sides.
Hmm.
Well, but I had a bad feeling. I when did I tell you? Oh, when he played knight G3. I was
Yes.
like, oh my God. I was like, he's gonna lose the game after knight G3. We were watching the game and I
Hmm.
said like, there's no way he survives this anymore, even though it's zeros.
Yes.
Because I saw that the rook goes to B3 and
Hmm.
suddenly black plays A4, A3, and you can't really stop it so easily.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, well, maybe he's holding around the time that he played like king takes A4. I was like, okay, well, he got rid of this A pawn and he's now up a pawn. So what are the chances you lose? And then he played this bishop G3. And I was thinking after bishop G3 that after knight C3, he is certainly going to take on C3, king C3, bishop B8, king C4. And I didn't understand the endgame, like how white draws,
Hmm.
but computer says it's draw. So,
Hmm.
okay, so Vidit will find it somehow.
Right.
And then he plays king A3, another heart attack. And then like knight B2, I think we actually like heard he had lost before the moves came in because there was delay, but we heard that he had lost, right?
We saw Jan, and I think somebody told us that Jan won.
Yeah, somebody told us.
Somebody from the media room told us that Jan
Yeah.
won. But yeah,
So
this knight to b2, after which the game is pretty much over.
yeah, so Vidit is like up and down. I have to say objectively, he never had realistic chances to win the tournament. He was too unstable. He had I don't know, I think he'll be very upset with the overall showing. It wasn't terrible. I mean, objectively, he scored -2, I think. It's disappointing. He had some bright spots, but he really did not ever have a moment where he can say like I was winning this tournament. So, and I don't think I ever felt like he was the one to catch up to or to beat in this
Yeah.
tournament. So that was Vidit's tournament, and after that we have well actually Alireza scored less, but Alireza is another interesting figure in the tournament.
Let's talk about Alireza. Yeah. And his tournament. Um, he started off well with a draw against Pragg. After that, lost against Jan with the black pieces. Complete roller coaster of a game. He actually played a very decent opening. I think he was even better at one point, but wasn't able to hold on to the complications and lost that game. Um, Quite an interesting dynamic between these two players because Jan has beaten him in two previous games in the candidates. This was the third consecutive victory in the candidates, but Alireza, whenever he faces Jan outside of the candidates, it feels like he has much more success, especially in recent times. I'm talking about the game in Tata Steel where he pretty much dismantled Jan with, I believe he played one knight c3, so quite a funny move. Definitely an interesting dynamic between these two players. But after that, being on -1, that crucial game against Hikaru where he lost in round 5 threw him to -2. It felt like he was on tilt at that point. Lost against Vidit -3, but then suddenly he beats Gukesh. Let's you catch up at that point and kind of give us a rundown of what happened with Alireza's tournament.
Well, yeah, so Alireza is an interesting. I mean, the thing is, like, he's obviously very brilliant, and Magnus, for example, says that he's the most brilliant among all the players and the most talented, which, I have a slight like issue with this word talent in general because I don't know what it means. Like, talent is a word we use for like promising players to predict where they'll go, but we don't really use it for established players, or like we shouldn't, right? Because you're either strong you either win or you don't win. I
Yeah.
mean, we nobody says like Magnus is talented. It goes
No,
without saying he's
that's
talented.
it.
He's
Yeah.
we just say he's strong, right? He's the strongest.
Yeah.
We don't say he's talented. Um, with Alireza, I guess the point is that like he's not reached his potential. This is what Magnus is kind of aiming at. Like he has brilliance. He has a ceiling which is higher than others, which I don't know. I I kind of disagree with it. Like clearly Magnus has the highest ceiling. We just like look at ratings, right?
Yeah.
And I've had the second highest ceiling
Yeah.
just by ratings.
Yeah.
So is Alireza's ceiling to hit like 2880 like Magnus? Can he do this? Um, I don't feel it. Like I definitely recognize that he's capable of playing really brilliant chess, but when I play him, I don't feel like this is the thing. Like sometimes I play Magnus, and of course you can fight with Magnus and you can beat him and you can outplay him and so on. But there are times when I've played Magnus and I don't feel like I do anything wrong, and he just wins. I can point to some games in the past. It doesn't happen all the time, of course. Usually to lose, you make a mistake. But there have been games where like I play Magnus and I just feel like there's kind of an unstoppable sort of I didn't really do anything wrong and I just lost. I've certainly never I felt this sometimes with Levon to some extent. Sometimes Hikaru has these moments where he basically just plays perfectly. Now it might be a stylistic thing with Alireza, but I've never felt this. I've lost one game to him, and it felt more or less uh like I was the one losing, not that he was the one destroying
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's it's not really meant as a criticism, but I don't feel like the tremendous strength um that he's like going to dominate the chess world, for example.
Well,
Not that he's going to be like the next Garry Kasparov. And
as of right now, as things present themselves right now, obviously not. But let's not forget he's also just 20 years of age.
no,
Plenty of
yeah,
experience for 20 years of
I
age. This is his second candidates.
no, I think that he will like achieve a huge amount in his career, and he has a long way to go, and there's a lot for him to do. Uh, it's not that. It's just that this is just my personal feeling. It could also be proven to be wrong because Magnus did say like I don't know if it was sort of in jest, but he was like that he'll be one of the greatest players in chess history. It's definitely possible, or he could also be like a tremendous player, but not one of the best in chess history. That's also possible. If you imagine um, like some of the best players of today, you wouldn't say they're the best players in chess history, but you would say that they are tremendously strong players and brilliant players and so on. Like, I don't know, Wesley, right?
Yeah,
Like tremendously strong player. You probably wouldn't say one of the best in chess history,
sure.
I guess. I
Yes,
mean,
I
he's
wouldn't.
like nothing,
Obviously, no.
not
Of
trying to take
course not.
anything away from
Of course
Wesley,
not.
but
Yes,
it's like a very high bar that you're setting.
of course. He's not in
So,
top five. Let's just put it that way. Best,
well, I mean, you would
maybe not
probably
top
put
10.
like
Uh,
many world champions before you put for example me you would put many world champions, right?
yes.
Like you would start with, Magnus and Gary or in whatever order, and then maybe you would put Fischer, maybe you would put Lasker, maybe you would put Karpov, Vichy, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And Capablanca, I know there's a lot of like big Kappa fans, so I'm not gonna upset them. And yeah, so Alireza, the thing is like very clearly emotional when things aren't going his way. And things didn't go his way early on. That was just it. He lost to Jan in the second round. He didn't beat me. Then he didn't beat Nijat, and then I feel the tilt started a bit. That was like he's starting to get tilted. Then he has this massive blunder against Hikaru, like draw to losing in one move. I don't think it was a difficult. Like people said Hikaru was putting pressure. I actually just think like King D3 I thought was an attempt to win. That was my feeling.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to draw, you can play. First of all, you can just start giving checks, right? You can also just play Rook D8 and you make a draw.
Mm-hmm.
G3, King F3. Uh, Black gives a check and then brings the king to E4. And obviously, White is never winning once the king is on E4, but White is also never losing.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can play Rook A8, and there's a million ways. So King D3 is like, I think he was thinking, how do I win this? How do I get winning chances? And then he just played King D3, thinking like, oh, maybe Black will play, I don't know, H5.
He played this
And
with
then,
1 second.
yeah. but it was not like panic. It wasn't panic like I'm losing. Because if you're panicking losing, you just play like rook f8 check and then you think next move.
Hmm.
Because you have increment at this point, right?
Right.
30 seconds after that. King g5, for example. You can even give another check. It's not good, but you can. But now you can take on d3, right? You can reconsider your options. But taking on d3, missing g3, rook g8, g2, it's like this is actually, I don't know, pretty basic tactics, right?
Right.
Like g3, g2. So,
Yeah.
okay. And after that, the tilt was like unstoppable. I mean, his next game against Vidit was, I, this is like terrible. You're on move 10, you're just lost with black, like +5. I mean, like, what is this? Uh, Queen f2. I mean, you can't play the Sicilian where your queen goes to f2 and your king is still on e8 and you haven't developed anything. It's without calculation, you can probably guess that this is not good for a variety of reasons, right?
Yeah.
So Vidit punished that. Excellent game from Vidit, but yeah, that was pretty silly and pretty tilted from Alireza. And then suddenly he like has this massively important win. Uh, and I thought he was going to lose that game too during the game. I was like, okay, what was the moment uh
This was
after
the
Queen b4
London
cd5?
against
Yeah,
Gukesh.
move 27. I was thinking, okay, ed5 and somehow Gukesh will win this. He is up material. I wasn't 100% sure, but Alireza had 3 minutes.
Right.
3 minutes for 13 moves, you're down 2 pawns. Okay, maybe you draw it. But considering the form that Alireza was in at that moment, I was thinking, yeah, it's just Gukesh wins
By
again and goes
default,
to like
more or
some
less.
stratospheric score.
Yeah. I think he would
And
have won to what, +4 at that point if he wins
yeah,
against
plus, wait,
Alireza?
no, +3 at that point, +3.
Hmm.
And then I go to the press room, or no, I didn't even go to the press room at that point. I think already I had just finished my game. Bishop e3 occurs on the board. And suddenly I see, oh, bishop c5 is met with queen b3. White is keeping the piece. It's actually a piece. I mean, I don't know what's happening in the position, but white is up a piece. And then by the time I had finished like my press duties, the game was over.
Yeah.
And so this was like, I don't
It,
know,
it
some
finished so
random,
fast. Yeah.
yeah, it didn't end up like influencing the tournament. Obviously, uh, Gukesh did win the tournament, but Alireza was like starting to play a very important role from that moment forward because he he played a good game against Pragg. He didn't lose. Pragg was still in the fight for the leaders. Then he almost beat Jan, like very close to winning.
Hmm.
Uh, and then the tilt started again.
Return.
So the tilt was now connected with this whole like shoe. I don't know.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that. The shoegate. Shoegate. So Abasov during the game against you complains to the arbiter that Alireza is stepping too loudly. Was he stepping too loudly?
Well, the thing is that first of all, yeah. So he complained while it was Abasov complained while it was his move, and I was at the board, and he like calls the arbiter over and says something I don't hear what they say, some whispering, but I basically get the idea because I do also hear that, yeah, someone, but it wasn't just Alireza. Someone else was walking and it was kind of loud. And I could see that Nija was just getting kind of irritated by the noise, fair enough. And then he complained. So I wasn't sure if it was Alireza or someone else. But but yeah, then at some point I saw the arbiter like approach Alireza and say, well, I don't know what they said, but I can assume that it was like walk quieter.
Yeah.
And
That's basically what the arbiter said after in his
yeah, it's
press
basically a
conference.
non-story because okay, you get told to like walk quieter or whatever. It's I mean, it's not your move. It's not really distracting. Like there were so many more distracting things besides that. I mean, like in the last round in time trouble, uh, my game against Jan, like someone like faints
Yes.
and collapses, and I hear like this clatter of like some person falling on the ground upstairs, and then people like surrounding the person. It's like okay, there's definitely more distracting things than being asked to walk a bit quieter when you have 40 minutes on your clock and you're standing up and it's not your move. So
So this was not in his time trouble because I think these were kind of some of the questions that people were in two camps. Some people were saying that this happened in the middle of the game. The ones on Alireza's side were like, no, this actually happened when Alireza was getting down on clock, close time trouble, and basically this is what affected him. Um, and he didn't convert against Jan from a very good position.
No, no,
Fair
he had
enough.
plenty of time. He was walking around. It was the arbiter approached him when he was walking around.
Mm.
Um, but okay, I think that was basically the story of his tournament. It like ended with this game against Jan, and then he lost a bunch of like important games to all the leaders. Like first to me. Okay, then he beat Nijat. It was kind of irrelevant, obviously, at that point. Then he lost to Hikaru, and then he lost to Gukesh. So he kind of helped everyone except for Jan. But he did lose to Jan, so everyone had the same. I don't know, Gukesh scored 1 out of 2 against him, and the rest scored 1.5.
Yes.
Okay, so you can't say he played like a huge role in the tournament, and objectively, it was a very poor tournament. He played poorly. He was never in contention. There's really not much to say. It was probably the most disappointing. Um, and again, I'm not trying to criticize him. Like I do think he's a great player. I do like him as a player. I do like him as a person. To some, I don't really know him, but seems like a nice person. But you just have to be objective about this. It was a very bad tournament, um, and I'm sure that he feels the same way. Like just a disappointing tournament for him.
Yeah, and I mean, in general, during the candidates, you always have a few players that at some point, once they get thrown out of contention of the tournament, there are wildcards. Like anything can happen. They can get motivated, but they can also completely collapse. In our case, basically Abasov and to some extent Alireza were the two players that completely
Well,
collapsed.
not just. I mean, Alireza, Vidit,
Vidit
Pragg, like
maybe.
near the end, they didn't have chances and they weren't playing at their like motivated level. And I think this is a fundamental issue. It's not like the candidates is a good system to determine like a really great player, but there is a lot of influence in terms of like when you get certain players. And I can say that I, for example, had a quite a bit of luck near the end in terms of getting guys at the right moment, but early on in the tournament, okay, probably getting guys at the wrong moment because early on I got like no chances, and at the end suddenly the dam opened, and I got like Vidit at the right moment, and I got Alireza at the right moment, and I got Pragg at the right moment, and so on.
But I feel like
Uh,
that's the case for every candidates, right? Like the second part of the
yeah,
candidates is always more bloody than the first one.
but this is the kind of fundamental problem with it because it's like people just no longer care once they're out of contention because
Yes.
only first place matters.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the World Cup, you kind of have to fight till the end because then you're eliminated, right? So once you no longer have chances, it's over. And then it's not like but you influence the tournament in the candidates, so it's not over for you. It's over for you, but it's not over for the tournament, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And and you still like if you lose games, then it's like very important for the tournament or potentially. And if you win games, then it's very important. So even if you have no chance, you still play a very, very big role in the tournament. Now, the nice thing about this one was that in the last round, everyone who had chances played each other,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely if you have someone like Abasov who is like -7 and he's been getting beaten up all tournament, then imagine the last round, like I play a dejected Abasov and I win in like 20 moves, right? And this decides something very important.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
could have something like this, you know? It's or in the first round, Abasov is like super motivated. He's trying to make like some very solid game against Jan, and he's really like playing Abasov in the first round, probably not great. Playing him in like the later rounds, probably quite good.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different things like this, but you know, I think that the whole system, maybe not the candidates itself, but definitely leading up to the candidates. Maybe we'll get into this at some point, but it needs a revision. Like the
Yes.
qualification for the candidates is a complete mess, I think, and even more so this time around. Like the FIDE circuit is probably the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
I think there's a big discussion about that with
It's
Anish
no, no, whoever is saying it's dumb
spearheading.
is
Uh,
absolutely correct. I could like show you things from the FIDE circuit, but it's maybe a bit outside the scope of discussion. But like the way that points are allocated, it's so absurd. I mean, I just wanted to point out that um, Maxim Chigaev, who's an excellent player, not to take anything away from him,
Mm-hmm.
but he got third place in the Menorca Open.
Mm-hmm.
Third place.
Mm-hmm.
He got nearly the same amount of points as I did for +3 in the candidates.
Mm.
Third place in the Menorca Open is like I don't know what his performance was, 2680.
2650, 2680, something like that. Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't make sense
Yeah,
because
yeah,
in
of
open
course.
tournaments you're only taking the top eight as an average, but you're mostly playing people who are not in the top eight. So open tournaments are being like valued super highly because let's say you have an open tournament with like, I don't know, Aragaisi and Pragg and so on and so forth, and then the average rating of the top eight is like 2720.
Right.
But mostly these guys play like 2300s and then they play like one game against a 2700.
Yeah, I guess the way the CEO, Fide Emil, addresses this is he wants to make the whole process a bit more equitable for players that don't get the opportunities to play in top level events like the GCT, like the candidates, like the World Championship cycle, by incentivizing and let's say adding more points, adding more weight to the open tournaments.
Okay, but if you want to do that, then I have a very simple solution. You just take, because ratings are democratic. Your rating goes up or down depending on the tournaments you play. Everyone has a chance to be 3000, everyone has a chance to be 1000, right? I mean, if you play well, if you win games constantly, your rating just goes up.
Mm-hmm.
And we see, for example, Arjun, to give his example as a player, is 2765. So what you do is you take the last 6 months average rating and you give a bunch of spots to the rating list. Last 6 months average rating to and you have to have a minimum like I don't know 40 games in that period. So there's no inactivity. And then you just take I don't know the top like four places if you want to do it by rating. So in that case you get by the current list you have
But
Hikaru,
then there's
me.
also the discussion about being easier to preserve your rating in closed events um, rather than open events, for
But
example.
that is like just by the rating list, we can actually see that that's not true because if you look at the players who have gone up recently, we have Arjun 2765, we have Noterbeck 2760, and then some of the players who you might consider like the kind of mainstream closed tournament guys like Wesley have dropped below them. Wesley, Lanier, Geary, uh, so on. So the rating system corrects itself. I mean, whether you play open tournaments or not, you have the guys who are performing better, they go up. The guys who are performing worse, they go down. It actually, I think, doesn't matter which tournaments you play because a guy like Arjun, like let's see his tournaments that he played. Grand K Open, he gained some rating. It was an open tournament. Menorca Open, he gained some rating. It was an open tournament. Then he's playing a closed tournament currently, the Siegmund tournament. He's gaining some rating. So
Mm-hmm.
he's playing very well. He's gaining rating.
Yeah.
Now, uh, we can take a guy who is also playing open tournaments and see if they're also gaining rating or if they're losing rate. Like, I don't think that you're going to see a pattern like people who play open tournaments, they all lose rating. I mean, Arjun is gaining rating.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Gukesh, he played one closed tournament. Obviously, Kansas, he gained 20 points. Nepo, Jan, he played a closed tournament. He gained 12 points, but Alireza lost 23. Like, why do we have this idea that open tournaments lead to rating loss? I don't get it. I actually don't get it because people who got to like 2780 or whatever, they had to start by playing open tournaments. That's how
Mm-hmm.
I gained my rating.
Right.
And when I first got to 2770, I got there by playing an open tournament. I was playing two back-to-back, three back-to-back, sorry. There in 2012, there was Vikenze, that's a closed tournament. But then I also played the Aeroflot Open and I played Reykjavik. I gained rating in both those tournaments, and I became 2770. And then I got criticized for playing open tournaments because
Mm-hmm.
I was beating up on weaker players.
Mm-hmm.
So again, first of all, this discourse makes no sense. It's illogical. It's usually inconsistent. People don't even know what they're arguing, and it's not borne out by like actual real life data that we have.
Yeah. 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 Still, I would like to see Anish in an open tournament. I would like to see Anish fighting.
But we do sometimes see that. Like Anish played the Grand Swiss and he got +3 and he gained a bit of
But
rating.
Grand Swiss
Actually,
is a special type of event, right?
why?
I don't know. I don't consider that a pure
It's an
open
open tournament.
tournament.
You're playing a mix of different players. Like, what are you trying to get from an open that
But
you
it's
only play
but it's
2300s?
open only for players over 2600.
But
Like
Ferrugia
it's
played open tournaments and he got criticized. He played open tournaments with like 2300s, 2400s, 2500s. He got criticized. So what exactly are people like looking
yes,
for?
that's true. That's true.
It's like if you
Uh,
play with weaker players and you go 7-0 against them, then you get criticized. If you play open tournaments with all like 26, 2700 guys, then it's not real. Then it's not like a real open tournament. And if you play closed tournaments, then you get criticized.
yeah,
What I
different
actually see
different
is
tiers of open tournaments.
yeah, but to me it looks like I just look at the list of players and okay, Gukesh is leading, very well deserved.
Hmm.
Second place in Tata Steel. By the way, his second place in Tata Steel plus
It
four
wait,
gave him 14
does it
points.
matter or it doesn't? Like if he loses the world championship,
Oh
hypothetically.
yeah, it does matter. Then he needs to
So the
qualify.
challenger doesn't get the candidate spot anymore.
Challenger doesn't get it, so this is actually relevant if he loses the match,
Right.
or if Ding loses the match, then he would have to try this way.
Hmm.
So, but look, Gukesh scored plus four in Tata Steel. He got second place because he lost the playoff. He got 14.22 points. Now, let's look at some other players. Uh, Mendonca, he won the Tata Steel Challengers, so his performance was much lower than Gukesh's because Gukesh got plus
Yes.
four in the
Hmm.
Masters.
Hmm.
Mendonca got in the Challengers. He got more points for the Challengers than the Masters.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Other players, Alexienko, he got second place in the Menorca Open. He got more points. Well, basically the same, but slightly more. 14.42 instead of 14.22. He got more points than Gukesh for plus four in Tata.
Yeah, it's kind
Daniel
of crazy.
Darda, Tata Steel Challengers, third place, 10 points. Very similar to second place in the Masters. It doesn't make any sense. There's no like logic behind it. I don't even understand how this happened. Like, how did they mess up so badly?
But they cannot
Okay, I
change
can go on
anything
and
right
on.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. At
Speaking
this
about
point,
the
it's too
system, I
late.
don't
But
think they can change it in the middle of it. We're still in a world championship, the next world championship cycle. So it has already
no, but this
started.
like FIDE circuit is completely, and it actually decides two spots because next year there's also a spot by FIDE circuit.
Yeah,
So it is like
two spots. Yeah.
uh, a
Do you think
total
they're gonna
mess.
change it for next year? So leave it as is for this year and then change it for next year?
I don't know if they can, but they should if they can.
Yeah.
I'm just like looking at this list and it makes no sense. I mean, like you'll still get a okay. Hans got 20.82 points for his Grand K Open. S- Six six and a half more points than Gukesh for plus four in Tata Steel Masters, which by the way is like a 2850 performance or something.
Yeah.
And you win an open tournament, you get 6 points more. What the hell is this?
Pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. Okay, back to the candidates. Uh, that was a roundabout. Okay, back to the candidates. Done with Alireza. Let's discuss who else do we have. We talked about Vidit, we didn't talk about Pragg. Let's talk about
Yeah.
Pragg.
Yeah, Pragg is well, he was actually in contention until relatively late.
Mm-hmm.
He fought well for the first half. The second half, things didn't go his way. He lost a very crucial game against Hikaru.
That was round
But
11.
overall, I think he's an excellent player. Okay, he maybe has some slight disappointment, um, but there's nothing really to say bad about his form. 50%, nothing like mind-blowing,
Mm-hmm.
but some bright moments, some bad moments, and okay, he did uh, lose some games once he was out of contention, which were quite important.
Right.
So
So he lost against Hikaru round 11. He lost against you round
13.
13. And then. Wait. He lost against Gukesh in round 2. Okay. So that's
Yeah.
his 3 minuses and 3 pluses, 2 against Abasov, 1 against Vidit.
Yeah,
Makes
he
sense.
beat Nijat twice, so it's not like he didn't have any like huge wins. He didn't have any like huge bright moments.
Very stable. Kind of expected, right? From him.
Oh, well, he's a stably good
Very
player.
stable player. Yes. Yes.
But yeah, it's not like he wasn't in huge contention, but he was kind of fighting at some point. I did consider him one of the guys with a chance along like halfway through when he
Mm-hmm.
was plus one.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the guys with a chance. Maybe not a huge chance, but he
And
was
I'm
in the
sure he
fight.
was looking at it the same way.
Yeah, for
trying
sure.
trying to
Anyway,
fight
I think
for
that
the
he
first
will
place.
very likely be back next time, and at some point in the candidates, he'll be a serious contender. I don't know if next time, but I think that he's one of the players with like one of the brightest futures, along with obviously Gukesh and Noterbeck and some of the other and Arjun. Still, like Arjun is my guy. He's the one I picked.
I think you picked
Gukesh got
Arjun.
there first though.
I think I picked Gukesh, you picked Arjun, but
Okay, well,
Arjun
I guess you're winning this
is
one.
number one, yeah, right now in India. So
He's number one by rating, but he's not playing the World Championship match. So
he is not playing the World Championship match.
also
So
the
there's
rating
a
is pretty
slight
close.
difference.
2 points separates them.
It's always like that. Yeah,
No, but
everybody puts
Arjun
him
is
in
an
number
excellent
one.
player. He wasn't in the candidates, but I think if he had been in the candidates, he would have done well. Although we can only speculate. Maybe we'll
Yeah,
see next time.
yeah. And last but not least, Jan.
Yeah, so we discussed Hikaru,
I
who
think we
was
more or
one
less
of well,
discussed
we
everybody
haven't
else.
obviously the winner we haven't discussed yet, but yeah, Jan. Um, so Jan is like for me one of the most interesting players in the tournament. First of all, because he won the previous two candidates, he has been only one of two players in the last three candidates. So it was me and Jan were the only players who have played all three of the last three. He won two of them, and he was leading this one from the second round until the 13th round when
And not a
he
lot of
lost.
pundits saw him as one of the favorites going into the event.
Yeah, it's of course you can say that's a mistake on their end. Like if someone wins the candidates twice,
But
and
how
they're young,
likely is it that they're going to win the third time? Is the question.
well, okay, the cards don't remember. Yeah. So of course those are only an indication of his strength, but that doesn't mean that he has lesser chance just because he won it in the past. Like it would be an anomaly, but the fact that he won in the past cannot logically mean that he has less chance in the future. It actually is the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Uh, if someone wins in the past, they've shown their potential, while someone who hasn't won, of course, they can win, but they haven't done it yet. And and Jan had this tournament where, if you look at the final result, he was actually the only player not to lose a game in
Mm-hmm.
the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at his games, he actually had a lot of very, very dangerous moments.
Yeah.
I can just
I mean,
speak
even
about,
the second game against Alireza, he was worse.
yeah, but that I wouldn't call it like that was worse, complicated worse, and maybe not even so much worse.
Sure.
But third round Gukesh,
Yes.
objectively maybe losing. Um, fifth round, sorry, Pragg, objectively dead lost from the opening because he had forgotten his prep.
Yeah. That was
Against
huge.
Hikaru, borderline losing again from prep because he forgot his lines
Mm-hmm.
accurately. Okay, not like losing, but very borderline. Uh, Against Alireza, borderline losing in round nine. Uh, and then against Vidit, objectively losing in round 11. And then in round 13 round 13, he was better against Hikaru, actually probably his biggest regret maybe at the end of the tournament. And then against me, dead loss. So did I say like six games where he was objectively lost or close to it?
Close to that. Yeah.
And he lost zero. So this cannot be an accident. He has to obviously have some skill, which
I would
maybe
say the time format definitely helped him in that regard. He saved a lot of position because his opponents were getting down to their last few minutes and potentially um, not necessarily blundering, huge blunders, but definitely feeling the pressure of the clock. And I think this is perhaps a factor that hasn't been discussed as much. I feel the time control, the time format in general was very different than the tournaments that we're used to play, we're used to commentate and spectate. Um, no increment for the first time control makes a huge difference
yeah. Yeah, well this
from a
it's hard to say
psychological
exactly.
perspective also.
Yeah, the time control is very interesting and it certainly played a role. We can only guess which role it played, but it certainly did play a role. So time control was definitely interesting because no increment, right? So this has it's not just about the fact that if you get in time trouble, it changes things. Like we could see Gukesh against Ferrugia. Maybe that would be different with increment. But also the fear of getting in time trouble was heightened, which led definitely to some bad decisions. In I, I think you can point to many people who've done this. Like my last game against Yan, there was definitely a fear of time trouble in certain of my decisions. And I think a lot of the other games I could point to, like I felt this against Vidit when he was winning against me. I felt this from Nijat in general, that he was always like afraid to get down to seconds, maybe against Hikaru, for example, when he was much better, that there was a fear of getting into like serious time trouble.
It felt like that with Nijat in a lot of games. I
Yeah,
think also
Nijat was
against
a little bit,
Gukesh.
a few of his decisions. I felt this from Gukesh, in fact, at some point, like his decision in the second game to play Queen B4. I think maybe he was kind of worried, and I think his worry, he told me he was worried, so I'm not speculating. His worry was based on time trouble, not based on the position.
Hmm.
But sometimes, like your fear colors your view of the position.
Yes.
And so, for example, in my second game against him, I actually thought I'm slightly worse, but then he started thinking for like 50 minutes on one move, and I start to think, oh, maybe I'm better. Like I understand I can't be better, but he's thinking so much, maybe I am somehow. That's why he's thinking for so long.
Hmm.
And we can point to other games as well, like definitely this game Vidit against Jan, like very nervy affair. Perhaps slightly, I think slightly influenced by the fear of time trouble. Pragg against Nepo, perhaps the game which Pragg didn't win.
Hmm.
A lot of games you can point to. So it had its own repercussions. We can't say for whose benefit overall, um, but definitely it did have like we might see a slightly different tournament if we had increment.
And that's why, maybe that's why Jan is also, at least part of it, why he's so successful in the candidates. It's because of this specific time control.
No,
Um,
but candidates last time had increment.
did it?
Yeah.
Hmm. I could swear
No,
that
I think they changed it this time. I don't know if they're
2020
experiment.
also. It had increment in 2020.
I think so.
Hmm.
Anyway, it's hard to say. I think that Jan in general has he keeps the pressure up on time, and this is very useful because it makes your opponent nervous. If you get in trouble, it makes it more likely that you get out of trouble. At least you have time to maybe find the way to equality if you ever get to that point
Hmm.
where you might need the time to find like to calculate the accurate way to get back into the game. So having a reserve of time and also your opponent constantly being under pressure and giving your opponent less time to think on your turn, it's it's a useful tactic.
Yeah.
It also makes your opponents nervous and makes you more confident. On the downside, of course, you can play superficially if you constantly do this. So it's a peculiarity which works for him, but it might not work for others. But definitely makes him a difficult opponent to play against. The fact that he's always playing very quickly and putting pressure.
Yeah. 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 And I think that's a key element to his success, especially in these candidates. Cool. All right.
But overall, let's say that Jan, although we can say he had a +3 good score, everything gained rating and so on, uh, he was amongst the most disappointed players at the end of the tournament. I think I was the most disappointed personally. I think I was the most like upset at the end, and Gukesh was obviously the happiest, and nobody else was really happy. But I think Jan was maybe the second most unhappy, and maybe
Absolutely.
Hikaru after that. Although Hikaru,
Hikaru
uh,
probably not. I talked to him a little bit. He felt that he didn't get any chances in the last round, and I would assume he didn't put too much pressure on himself to prove an advantage with White. Even though I'm sure he wanted to, I guess he didn't feel he had a grip whatsoever on the position after
no,
missing
he
rook to
didn't.
d1, after
He
allowing
didn't have like
b4
a
basically.
clear chance. Like I had a clear chance. I mean, I
Right.
was winning, then I would go to tie breaks, and then whatever would happen. But I would certainly have a pretty decent chance in tie breaks, right?
But Jan didn't have a clear chance. Actually, he didn't have
Jan
any
didn't,
chances in the last round.
but he could have maybe put pressure on the previous game against Hikaru. And when you're only half a point away, you will think about like the things that you missed. I think that Jan basically extracted the maximum from his tournament. Like each half point he saved, each position that he ground out to win against Vidit, for example, each bad position that he saved. He did have like the one thing against Hikaru, he was much better with D5, but that's basically the only place in the tournament where he could have extracted more.
Yes.
And then he would have extracted the absolute maximum if he had won that game and went to +4. That would be you cannot get more than +4 from the games he had, from the positions he had.
Yeah.
Hikaru did not extract the maximum because he lost 2 games, which obviously you cannot lose those games, right?
But also he won
That's
a couple of games that maybe he didn't have any reasons to win them. Like for example, in fact, both games against Alireza, if you think about it. Even though the second one he was winning and then he let go of the advantage and then
no,
uh,
okay.
but
The
the
second
first
one, a
one
normal
was
game.
just a gift,
You know, a
yeah.
bit back and forth, but still normal game.
But the first game was just a gift.
Yeah, the first game, of course, it was a natural draw. It was a logical draw, and then he won. That was very unexpected. The second game, I think, Alireza was under pressure. Normal, totally normal result in normal game.
Yeah.
Um, Alireza made so it's actually funny. I was playing against Vidit, but I was standing up at the time. It was like after the first time control, so we had a bit of a respite. And I got up, and Alireza made the move G5 and got up. And Hikaru pulled like the most extraordinary faces. I mean, he was just like, what the hell is this move G5? Which was actually correct because G5 turns an objectively drawn position into a loss. But Hikaru's expressions after G5 were like, what is this move? Which makes sense because it is like a pretty huge mistake. On the other hand, I wouldn't like have the same, I think, instant reaction that I went from like drawn to winning because it is kind of based on the fact that like G4 is very strong and there's some subtleties there. It's not like a simple position.
Right.
But yeah, Hikaru immediately recognized that G5 is losing, just judging by his face and his expressions. And okay, finally we have to talk about Gukesh, right? It's
Yep.
the winner.
The winner,
He
the new challenger.
he uh he won with +4, losing 1 game, winning 5. He actually could have won that game, maybe that he lost, or at least not
Against
lost it.
Alireza.
So he
Yeah.
could have been +5.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have any other bad positions in the tournament,
Except against
which
you.
is no, he didn't have a bad position against me. I mean, he had a slightly worse position. It was objectively equal from let's say a pure like if black plays very well and white plays very well, it's an equal position. Uh, it was never bad. The highest eval in that game, with like a super strong engine,
With a
was
strong engine.
0.3,
Yeah.
0.35.
Yeah. Yeah. The chess.com engine was saying like plus 0.7, 0.8, but
No, it's 0.35. If you like, I understand, of course, white maybe can put pressure practically, and it's possible to. It's not like a draw or anything, but he was not in trouble. I mean, at worst, you could say he was slightly worse. Although to me, over the board, I did feel like once I take the pawn, I'm much better, but that was an incorrect assessment. And he had no other bad positions against Jan. He had like slightly worse from the opening. Nothing else. It's amazing. His stability was
yeah, he was very stable in this event.
yeah, he had the most stable tournament. So that's why you can definitely say he won
Yeah.
because everyone else was up and down. Okay, I was up and down.
Can't say he extracted the most out of his games just because, he didn't win against Jan in the first game. Clear advantage, decisive advantage. Didn't win against Alireza, another decisive advantage. Let go of that one.
Well, that one I don't know if it was decisive, but it was a big one. It was a big
It,
advantage.
close to decisive, I guess.
Close to decisive. Yeah. If he had extracted the maximum, okay, he beats Jan.
He would be on like +6. Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, let's say I extract the maximum. But let's just like look at it that way. Like, I don't lose to Hikaru because let's say I make a draw there, because it was equal. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we're looking like from an ideal point of view. And then I beat Jan in the last round, so now I have a point more. So now I'm +5, and I'm sure I had something else which I like missed. Okay, I was definitely like decently better against Nijat.
Well, against Hikaru in the first round.
Oh, against Hikaru, I was objectively winning, so now I'm +6, and then let's say against Nijat,
Yeah,
+7.
yeah,
So, you can't
yeah,
really look at it this way.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, Everyone, like Vidit, for example, if he extracted the maximum. So if Vidit extracted the maximum, he draws the first game, he wins the second, as he did. He draws the second game, let's say, although he was decently better at some point, but let's just say he draws. So now he's +1. He draws against Jan. He's +1. He beats me. He's +2. Beats Alireza as he did, +3. He was winning against Nijat, +4. Against Gukesh, he draws. I mean, he lost, but let's say he draws, so he's still +4. He beat Hikaru, +5. Draw against Pragg. He beats Jan, +6. He doesn't lose to me, still +6. He was never better there. And then let's give him +7 for beating Nijat, although he wasn't actually better, but
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
somehow. So
Yeah,
yeah, you can't really do this, right?
yeah, yeah. No, Gukesh,
Everyone would be like +6, +7.
look, amazing,
But yeah,
amazing tournament.
yeah, Gukesh, I mean, what can you say? It was a historic result for 17-year-old. I think he's 17, yeah.
Yeah,
Or at least quite, I mean, very young player.
he is 17.
Yeah,
Extremely
17.
mature player for 17. I really thought that the nerves are going to get to him in the last few rounds, but he didn't show any signs of nervousness.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's a shame, of course, that I didn't play a playoff against him. Not a shame for him, but a shame for me, because it would have been interesting, and I would have really welcomed the opportunity. If I had lost, okay, what to do? But I would have really welcomed the opportunity. But yeah, he played an excellent tournament. He won 5 games. That's a lot. I remember like years ago, I think my first candidates, 2016, in Vikensee, the tournament before that, Rustam was telling me, I was working with Rustam Kazımcan at the time. He was telling me, okay, you win 4 games in Vikensee, and this is good practice. I don't care if you win the tournament, just win 4 games. And this is a good practice because you need to win 4 games in the candidates. And so that was the threshold, 4 games. And Gukesh won 5.
Mm.
And 4 games was not enough for me. For actually for Hikaru, he won 5. But
Did you win 4 games in
yeah,
Tatasil that year?
I did. I won exactly 4 games. But
Okay.
then I only won 2 games in the 2 games in the candidates, so it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
It was almost enough, but it wasn't quite enough.
That's the one where you had to win against Kariaki in the last round, right?
Yeah, yeah,
With
I
Pragg.
would have to win. That was before the playoff system, so then I needed to win. We were tied, but I needed to win because he had the better, more wins tiebreak,
Yeah, that's kind of silly. I
which
mean,
is a funny one.
you cannot use anything else but a match.
Of course, playoff
For
is what you should
it
be
is
using. It's
necessary. Yeah.
yeah, but it's good that they finally implemented it because for years and years the players were asking for it,
Yeah.
and it's good that they finally did it.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that I can say is a very welcome change that unfortunately didn't get a chance to be used this time. It would be the first time, but maybe next time. But yeah, Gukesh, he definitely deserves this victory, and um, I don't know against Sting.
Yeah, that's a good question. How do you see that match playing out?
I really don't know because it depends so much on Ding as well. So like normally Ding, he has a lot of things going for him in this match. I mean, he
Like
has
what?
so much more experience.
Experience. That's a big one.
Uh,
Pressure.
he,
Most
he
likely.
generally speaking, like at his top level, Ding still should be a better player than Gukesh. I mean, it's quite close, but if we consider Ding at like his best level, then he should be a stronger player than Gukesh.
Yes.
Not that Gukesh, I mean, he's enormously strong, but still, of course, we would consider Ding to be a favorite if he brings his best game, right?
But is Ding broken? Is the question.
Yeah, this is what, well, I'll play him soon. We'll see. Norway chess, 2 games against Ding.
Oh yeah, that's coming
Uh,
up. That should be
yeah,
interesting.
1 month, less
Yeah,
than a
and
month.
obviously that's a comment by Magnus in a recent podcast that he discussed the match, the upcoming match between Ding and Gukesh. He said that nobody actually knows where Ding lies in terms of his psychological state and chess state in general. He might be broken from the simple fact that the weight of the World Championship match might have gotten to him. Even though he won that, just going through the process of the World Championship match, preparation that goes into it, the nerves that go into it, might have played a part in his recent performance. And whether he's going to come back, I guess we're going to find out, and we're going to get a glimpse of whether he's going to do that, whether he's going to come back in Norway. So that
Yeah,
should be
judging
interesting.
from Weisenhaus, he didn't look like he was having a good time there. But
Right, like his mood in general, yeah, outside of his moves, but his mood was also probably pretty heavy.
yeah, his play, his general demeanor, yeah, it wasn't great. I really don't know. I would like to see Ding, not that I like have any stake in the match at all, but I would like to see Ding at least play well, come back to a semblance of his former strength.
Actually, this
And
is this is
but at
another.
the moment, I don't know.
Okay, let's continue. Just let's make this the last point, and kind of discuss it a little bit, because there's always this discussion about experience versus youth, and why experience is so important. But I I see it in kind of a different light, from the perspective of these tournaments really take a toll on you. Everything in the World Championship cycle, especially the last two, the World Championship match and the candidates, they take a toll on you. If you don't win them, then it's like a boxer that takes too many hits to the head at some point. Um, and then if you don't have that experience, then your chin, let's say your fighting chin, is still there. Your nerves are still there. Do you see it that way? Do you feel experience is more valuable? Which one is which in your estimation?
Um, yeah, I don't really know. I don't think experience matters so much. Just looking at the like candidates in general and other tournaments and how young players are so successful so quickly. I don't know. I mean, there's advantages to experience, but it also comes with some other downside, perhaps, um, like some baggage. Some
The
players
baggage, the
have
nerves. Yeah,
baggage,
yeah,
yeah, as well, like from perhaps difficult tournaments or bad results, or like obviously Ding is carrying baggage, whatever. I mean, chess baggage, not personal stuff, but whatever happened in the last few years has lowered his level, whether it was like difficulty with COVID stuff,
yeah.
travel restrictions, all that, or lack of practice or lack of motivation or the match being very difficult for him. He's clearly not as strong as he was 5 years ago. And you can't say that about all the players. Like Hikaru, for example, looks like he's stronger than 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but everyone is sort of individual. I don't know if experience matters, even with dealing with nerves and stuff. It's really hard to say.
Yeah, everybody's
But
different. It seems like.
yeah, I mean, Gukesh will be highly motivated, but will Ding be highly motivated is a question because he's already world champion. Does he really care so much about keeping the title as long as he can? Is that a goal for him? Um, is he tired of being kind of beaten up on in some of his recent tournaments, which happened? He lost a lot of games. He didn't do well. He was never in contention for anything in any of his tournaments.
Yeah.
Like Weisenhaus, he was last place. The Grenke tournament, he was like fighting for last basically the entire time. And Fakenze, it's just a bad tournament. So if he continues his level, it's like not a surprise to say he's a huge underdog.
Yeah.
If he comes back to if he gets motivation, trains well, comes back to his normal self, then probably a bit of a favorite. But I wouldn't put money on either one. I wouldn't feel confident putting money on either one. I did tell you like a year ago, more or less exactly, that I thought Ding would be dropping out of the top 10,
Yep.
which is a prediction which hasn't really borne out, but he hasn't played enough for it to really bear out. And he is kind of close. So I think a lot depends on Norway. Like in terms of like how to judge his his demeanor, because Norway is a classical chess tournament, 10 rounds with Magnus, with me, with Ding, with Hikaru, with like the top bunch of players in the world, basically. Not with Jan, but with many, many very top players and Magnus.
Yeah, double
And
round
if
robin.
Ding does well, it feels like he's sort of back to something.
Yeah.
If he has another disaster, I mean, you can't have so many without getting dejected, right?
hmm hmm No, and I mean, especially with a match coming up shortly, probably in November, he definitely is looking to um, get himself back on track in terms of his preparation, in terms of his psychological makeup. All of those things will definitely matter, and we're going to get some answers later in May during Norway. So excited for that. Cool, Fabi. Well, welcome back to both of us. Hopefully, we'll get some more episodes coming up shortly. Maybe we'll do a technical analysis of the games, the candidates as well, like a mini series. And then we have some big names most likely coming up on the podcast soon. So excited to get back to it. Uh, it was an event. Now it's time to get back on track, get back in on the journey, and fight hard for every tournament, I guess. Right?
Yeah, well, it's a huge disappointment for me personally, but it's sort of the nature of sports that you I mean, okay, first of all, it's sort of deserved from my side because I was given a golden opportunity. So if I spoil that one, it's sort of deserved that I don't win. Also sort of the nature of sports that you will have some major successes and major failures. And this was, I mean, if you look at the score, it doesn't look like a major failure, but just because of the nature of the last game,
Mm-hmm.
that's how it felt and still feels.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's uh, not the end of the world. It's very unfortunate. What can I say? On the other hand, there are ways that the candidates could have proceeded in which I don't get any chances, and that maybe wouldn't feel as bad, but it wouldn't actually objectively be any different for me.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot to um, kind of be, I wouldn't say to look forward to um, to look forward to doing my best in, which is there's a lot of events. There's Norway Chess, which is the next one, but there's also some Grand Chess Tour events that are quite important
Champion Chess
because
Tour,
there's
GCT.
it's funny. It's like every candidate, I finish a candidate and it feels like some kind of major chapter is finished. But but then immediately after, I have to start thinking about how to qualify for the next candidates. The only time I didn't think about that was in 2018 when I won because that meant that I play the match and um, if I lose, I qualify for the next candidates. If I win, I'm the world champion. So that wasn't a thought at that point. But uh, I remember thinking like 2021 candidates ended. And it was like, okay, I put all this prep into it, and then it's just a week-long thing that because I was split in two.
Yeah.
And then it's just it's over as soon as it begins, it feels like. And then suddenly you're thinking about how to qualify for the next one.
But it was also
And
a completely different situation back then because we didn't actually know how, let's say, the next season is going to look like with COVID and whatnot at that point.
yeah, that was a bit of a different thing. But I remember thinking like, what's okay? How do I qualify for the next one? Back then it was like the rating spot, but then I realized, or they announced that the rating spot was no longer in effect,
Mm-hmm.
which was actually like a huge
Disappointment.
disappointment because my rating would have qualified me pretty much directly. And then the funny thing is that Ding actually got it's not a rating spot, but uh Karyakin withdrew or not withdrew. He was forcibly withdrawn by FIDE. And and then Ding got the rating spot. So rating wasn't used for the main qualification, but it was used as like a replacement qualification. Anyway, some bizarre story there as well. So yeah, it's interesting, and I will try to do my best this year and keep my rating up, try to win some events, um, and we'll see.
Absolutely. The journey continues. Guys, make sure you, if you've enjoyed our return, make sure you like the channel, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, listen to it on all the platforms that you can listen podcasts on, and yeah, continue supporting the journey. We've definitely felt a lot of support during the candidates. I was in the fan zone and I met a lot of you there. A lot of you were saying that you are big fans of the podcast, big fans of Fabi and supporting Fabi. So that was definitely a great thing to see. So keep doing that, and we'll see you guys in the next episode and maybe at the next tournament. Cheers.